Okay, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about parts. Now, Autodesk Inventor can do a couple different things. It can make parts, it can make assemblies, it can make drawings. We'll talk about those later on. But this one, we really want to focus on those parts. And then a part is just an individual single piece that we're going to do. So what I have here is the screen of the Autodesk Inventor when you start it up. Sometimes the different screens, depending on how they're configured, may look slightly different than this, but there's many different ways to get into a part when you start Autodesk Inventor. And I'm going to show you just a couple of them. One is on the main screen here, there is a new part. We can click on new part. That will open up a new part. Another way to do it is to click up here under the new, and we can say new, and then it says new, and then it's going to ask us, what do we want to bring up? So this is sometimes a little bit more generic. It comes up with a few more options for us. It has parts, assemblies, drawings, and presentations. Now again, we're just going to be dealing with the parts up here, and they show that there's two different types of parts here, and one's a sheet metal part and one's a standard part. We're going to be dealing with just the standard parts. Now the other thing I want to point out is over here on the left hand side is that there's some different templates that we have here, one being metric. So if we click on that, it's going to bring up different part templates for metric layouts, but really what we're going to be doing is using the English ones for just the standard parts. So again, although there's a lot of different options, this is the only one that you're going to need to know right now. So we're going to click on standard part, and then we're going to say create, and it is going to bring up our brand new part screen. So what I want to do is kind of give you an overview of this part screen because there's a lot of different things on here, and it looks a little intimidating when you first look at it. And so if we take a look right at the top of the screen here shows that it has some quick launch icons. So it has a new, an open, a save, a undo, it has a redo, and it has a few other things. A lot of these functions up at the top here, we're not necessarily going to use. Maybe open, maybe save, or new, but really there's other ways to get into it. And as you start to use it, you may or may not decide to use some of those quick launch icons up there. Now the next thing is right below it, and this is our ribbon. And here we have a whole bunch of functions, or I should say, options for us to use. Now with this, there's a tab at the top, so we can click on this tab and it's going to bring up different functions that we can use, and one of them being file over here. So we can open up new parts, we can create new parts in there, but the main two that we're going to use is 3D model and sketch. The rest of them, there's just a lot of stuff that we're not going to be using in there. So in this case, we're just going to look at those two, 3D model and sketch, for our parts. Now on the left hand side here, it says model, and that's the name of our part. Well, not the name of our part, but that's the model, the model tree on the left hand side. Part 2 is the name of our part. I haven't named this part yet, so that's by default. Once I name the part, it will change this here. And then there's a few things in here. There's a drop down that shows different views. There's another drop down that shows the different origins and some planes and center points and all that kind of stuff. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then it has the end of part. Now, as we start making our part, and we're going to build our part with features, and those features are going to end up showing up in this over here, and that will in this tree, that will then be able to see them, and we'll be able to modify them and select them, and a variety of other things in there. So we'll use this quite a bit. We have our main graphic screen now down in the lower left hand corner. It looks like an X and Y axis, but there's really a triad here. So the X, Y, and Z, it shows it in three-dimensional space. Obviously there's nothing on our screen, so it's not really going to, we won't really see much here, but this triad will kind of give us an orientation of how our part or our plane is oriented on the screen here. We also have our cube up here that shows us the front, top, and side planes in here. So we can kind of look at that. We can actually click and drag on this to rotate around. And actually, it's not going to really do much because there's not much on the screen here. But we also have some ways to kind of rotate our part around with using this. And I'll show you some of that as we get into it. And we also have these other options over here. Some of these are really not going to be used much. I'm going to show you some shortcuts. So really this, the pan, the zoom all, and the rotate is not going to, or orbit, I guess, free orbit is what we call this one here, I'll show you some shortcuts so we don't necessarily need to use that on the screen. Down here at the bottom, if we do open up multiple parts, they will end up showing up down here in the bottom, so we can click between parts. We can open up multiple parts at the same time and kind of work between them if we want to. We also have some other layouts down here. Now again, I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff. It's a little bit more than what I want you to get into to learn the basics. So that's just kind of the overview of this part screen.